Is 2025 the new 1988? Probably not, but today I am looking at three new albums, all with strong links to that year. So come on in and let's find out whether that's a good thing. Hey, welcome to Acting is Reacting with me, JSB, an underemployed actor who loves music. So I've got three recent releases, as I've said, all with ties to 1988, but with a mostly modern tinge to them. So the albums are When Yesterday Comes Around from Alien, Deacon Blues' The Great Western Road, and most surprisingly of all, after a 32-year gap, we've got a fifth album from The Adventures, Once More with Feeling. So let's have a closer look at each of them in that order. So we start with Alien, a legendary AOR band in melodic rock circles, but largely unknown outside of their native Sweden. Their debut came out in 1988 and hit number 2 in Sweden, driven by the success of the single Only One Woman, which is an old Bee Gees pen tune, which surprisingly hit number 1 for 6 weeks. Don't know that it did much elsewhere, but yeah, they were big briefly at home, and then it all kind of fell apart and lineup changes abounded, and they didn't actually make another album with the same lineup until 2014's Eternity, and that is probably my favorite Alien album. Um, I might be the only one who feels that way, but hey. Now, the band is based around singer Jim Jidhead. If I knew how to say that, I would. Guitarist Tony Borg, and the remaining member of the original five is Toby Tarek on drums. And those three made an album in 2020 called Into the Future, which went in a heavier direction and wasn't very well received. Though I actually think this is pretty decent and deserves a fresh listen. Anyway, we are brought right up to date with When Yesterday Comes Around, and as you can see, they really are going for the this is the album to follow up the debut properly. I mean, new, old, new, old. Yeah, you see? Uh, and the music, it is of a similar ilk to that original album, but is it any good? Well, well, it starts well with a good 1-2 punch with In the End We Fall and If Love Is War. I've seen a mixed response to Jim's vocals, but while he's of course sounding older, I think he's excellent as always. He's sometimes been called the Swedish Steve Perry, which is probably stretching it a little bit, but he is in the upper echelon of AOR singers from the 80s. He's just not so well known as those from America, obviously. Now, as I said, Only One Woman was a slightly odd cover choice on the debut that turned out to be a smash, so this time they've got another odd cover choice in the form of Strange Way, which was originally a hit for US soft rockers Firefall in 1978. Now that is actually a great song, and they rework it in proper Alien style, so that one is a winner for me. Unfortunately, most of the rest of the tunes just aren't as memorable, and it all sounds nice while it's playing, but there's just not that much that sticks. Things do pick up towards the end of the album with Hearts on Fire and the title track, and then for some reason there's a 2-minute instrumental outro that closes the album but does nothing and goes nowhere, and you're 53 minutes in by that point, so some some culling of tracks along the way could have helped the album overall, I feel. So a bit of a mixed bag, worth hearing for long-time fans, especially those who didn't go for this one for whatever reason. I hope next time that they just revert to doing what they really want to do and not what they feel they should be doing, if you see what I mean. Because personally, I found Into the Future a much more satisfying release um, with some much more memorable songs on it. And of course, if you're looking for Swedish AOR from 2025 that evokes the 80s and is completely memorable, well, an album I've reviewed previously, uh, well, it just does it so much better. Still, not a bad effort. And while it could have earned a higher rating with either a few better songs or simply a few fewer songs, as it stands, it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Probably not one I'm going to revisit a lot, but pop it on, you're not going to hate it. Hopefully, I can give a more glowing review to the other two selections for the day, but we shall see. All right, moving from Sweden to Scotland, well, to a Scottish band, the album was recorded in Wales. Anyway, the most successful of today's bands, Deacon Blue, and indeed the most successful of today's albums. This is the Great Western Road, which entered the UK charts at number 3, and unsurprisingly perhaps, hit number 1 in their native Scotland. I'm only a fairly recent convert to the Deeks, as nobody calls them, and in fact, the only full album that I've owned previously, other than a compilation, is their debut, Raintown, from '87. So I don't know how this stacks up against their other recent releases, or indeed how those stack up against the original from late '80s and early '90s. But we've still got 4 of the original 6 members on board here. We've got lead vocalist and prime songwriter Ricky Ross, sounding great, I have to say, joined by Lorraine McIntosh on vocals and percussion, James Prime on piano and various other keyboards, and Dougie Vipond on drums. Again, I don't know if that's how you say Vipond? I don't know. Drums, that's pronounced correctly, for sure. Anyway, the title track opens things up and starts fairly gently, but builds gradually into a memorably anthemic opener, and then things only get better from there. First single, late '88, no less, opens with some stirring strings arranged by James Prime, and that is simply a great pop rock tune. Upbeat, feel good, and with that slight nostalgic tinge to it. Great stuff. Oddly, Deacon Blue didn't actually have an album out in '88. Raintown was '87, and then the follow-up was '89. But we're definitely still in the same zone, right? People Comes First comes next, and that's one of several tracks to have noticeably brilliant bass work from Lewis Gordon. I find, especially in the verses, that I'm conflicted when listening to it as to whether to sing along with the lyrics or to the bass line. It really pops that much. Nice. Then we've got Wait on Me, which is more keyboard led, but has some other great vocal hooks that sink into your brain for sure. I won't keep going track by track, as you probably haven't got all day, but there's more great bass work on Ashore. Up Hope has perhaps the catchiest chorus on the album, and Turn Up Your Radio is a very worthy second single, another up-tempo bouncy number, this time augmented by more strings and a brass section. I mean, what more could you want? I don't know if anybody is actually playing these tunes on the radio, but if not, they should be, because if this came on the radio, you would turn it up. I mean, I don't know, I haven't listened to the radio in decades. Why would you? How we remember it slows things down, but it is a gorgeous tune and has a more melancholy approach to nostalgia than we get on some of the other tracks. So it's almost excellent from start to finish, but kind of like Alien, if Deacon Blue had limited their track listing to 10 tracks, this would have been beneficial, because at the end we've got 2 tracks that are both slow numbers. I mean, there's a mix of tempos throughout the album, and I'm not always wild about ending an album on a slowy, but I certainly don't want to end on 2 of them. It really kills the momentum. The tunes in question aren't actually at all bad, they just end things on a downbeat note and aren't as strong as most of the rest of the songs, to these ears at least. Mid-century modern, woo woo wow, would have been the perfect closer, but never mind. It's really only a quibble. Still 4 stars from me. So, from a Scottish band with a male lead vocalist and female supporting vocalist to a Northern Ireland band with a male lead vocalist and female supporting vocalist for the Adventures' 5th album, Once More with Feeling. Now, Wikipedia still lists them as a defunct band, even though they've been playing a gig or 2 in their native Belfast most years in the past decade. Hubby and I have been up to catch them twice, and he went up a 3rd time this year, reporting back very excitedly via WhatsApp that they played a bunch of tunes from a new album, because let's remember their previous album, Lions, Tigers and Bears, came out in 1993. So he's been a fan since their peak in, you guessed it, 1988, when their tune Broken Land made the top 20 and held the distinction of being the most played song on Radio 1 that year. Unfortunately, despite the fact that they were managed by Simon Fuller, sadly before he learned how to take a band and make them massive, that was pretty much the extent of their commercial success. Though the subsequent Sea of Love album featuring Broken Land did make the top 30 and go silver. The follow-up, the excellent Trading Secrets with the Moon, which we have on vinyl there, only made 64 and disappeared very quickly. But that's what they looked like in 1990. And that's how they're looking today. Nice signed card came with the album. This is from Cherry Red Records, who've done a fantastic job, as they always do. Best of luck from Terry. Love always from Pat, and I've no idea what Eileen's saying. So as with Alien, we do have 3 members from the Adventures heyday effectively making up the current lineup. So Terry Sharp and Eileen Gribben on vocals, and Pat Gribben on, well, most other things, but mainly guitars and keys, as well as being the songwriter for all cuts, though one did have a notable co-writer, but we'll come to that in a sec. So this kicks off with My Imaginary Girlfriend, which has a very 80s keyboard line, but it's also memorable, and a memorable song overall. Good opener, but a bit of an outlier, as that distinctive 80s sound doesn't really crop up again. Whether that's a good or a bad thing depends on your taste. For me, it's probably a good thing, and it is the poppiest tune on the album by a distance, probably. The bulk of the album is more acoustic-led, no doubt informed by the fact that most of it, including the keys, acoustic guitars and vocals, were recorded in Pat's home studio before he added electric guitars and other instruments came in later as well. Next up is With the Cats, which is another memorable tune, which I can attest to, as it's the one I'm found singing most often from this album so far, at least, while When the Sun Goes Down is one of the more acoustic-driven tracks and possibly my favourite on the album. Love Talk follows that with an opening line about when the sun goes down, which is either intentional or terrible sequencing, and I can't decide which. But another good song. Uh, then we get to Lucy, or Lucy, which is another more acoustic track. And this one is the co-write I mentioned. It's a reworking of an old tune written by Pat with the great Kathy Dennis, and originally written with the intention of it being recorded by S Club 7. To no avail, as it turned out, and again, probably a good thing. So, as you'd expect, it is another fairly poppy tune, and it's notable for being the first album track they've ever released with Eileen on vocals. Lead vocals, I mean. The second half of the album isn't quite as strong as the first, but the drop-off is only slight. Down by the Water has a tasty electric guitar solo from Pat. He can certainly play, though he's not one for the limelight. In fact, when we've gone up to see them, he kind of hides away at the back of the stage, but I see you, Pat. I know what you can do. Song for You is acoustic again. I don't find that one quite as strong as the rest of the tracks, but not a bad tune and it's got some nice harmonies going for it, while I Still Dream of You, fittingly, has a dreamier quality, especially in the chorus, and a nice combo of guitars and keyboards on that one. The Hanging Tree was the first track Pat completed for the album, and it's the other outlier here. It doesn't quite fit the style of the rest of the tunes, being more rockabilly in nature. It's definitely hubby's least favourite, and I'm inclined to agree, though being the shortest track as well at 2.5 minutes, it doesn't really outstay its welcome, and there's more excellent guitars from Pat here, both acoustic and electric. Then we end with To Whom It Concerns, another older tune that was reworked to finish off the album, and at last we have a proper album closer. Pat even mentions in the liner notes that it's got the feel of an album closer, and it really does. Some great lyrics on this one, and we even come full circle with Eileen singing The Sea of Love in the background as the track reaches its conclusion. So Pat says that this is the best album they've ever made, and while I wouldn't go that far, Sea of Love and Trading Secrets with the Moon remain my favourites. It's certainly a very welcome addition after all this time, and I hope they manage to do some gigs beyond Belfast, and maybe even make a sixth album at some point, though that might be a bit much to expect. Anyway, it's also nice and concise at 10 tracks and 35 minutes, so it's a very easy listen and another 4-star effort from me. As I say, thanks to the folks at Cherry Red Records for giving these guys a new home for the album and getting it out there. It's got to be the surprise of the year, and a very nice one too. So there we are, 3 2025 albums with links to 1988. Mostly good and sometimes great stuff on these, so I don't need too many more albums like this now, but I do enjoy them, and in fact, if another album came along that evoked the 80s, I really hope it does something a bit different with it. Yeah, okay, maybe that's one for another day. Meanwhile, check out other reviews of recent albums in all sorts of genres, and I will just say thanks for watching today, and bye for now, but not for long.
Acting is reacting. This does not mean acting again.